Ladies, gents, aunties and uncles, welcome to Dohzy Corner. I'm Fidelis.
And I am Deborah, and we are glad to welcome you into this space.
Ladies, gents, aunties and uncles, welcome to another episode of Dohzy Corner. I'm Fidelis. I'll be hosting you guys today, and here is my lovely co-host,
Deborah. I'll be your co-host for this episode.
Okay, so what are we going to be talking about today?
Today we're going to dive into finances. But
Yep.
Not just finances. Financial challenges that are experienced in the African diaspora.
It's going to be an interesting one. So we are going to get into a couple of interesting topics from a cultural perspective. How do we handle the different cultures, right? Most of our audience have some sort of an attachment to some other country, and most of us find ourselves in Canada, or I would say in the West. How do we manage the different cultural perspectives? How do we balance responsibilities that we have here and some responsibilities back home? And as maybe we grow older, how do we manage our finances? So those will be some of the things that we are going to explore today. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be an interesting one. So stay tuned.
Yeah. Before we get into it, I have a little question.
Yep, sure.
There's this lady that I used to watch. I don't remember her name, but she was basically talking about like how we all have a different style of attachment to money because of our background, because of where we come from, and just what we've been exposed to, right? And so my question to you, I'll answer afterwards, and you can answer too at home if you'd like in the chat. But what would you say that your relationship with money is like? And based on what it is, how do you think that the way you grew up played in that respect, the relationship you now have with money?
Okay, I'll give a brief summary on that, and then you can answer the question yourself too, because I'm actually curious to know what you think. For me, I'll be very blunt. I think I've had to do a 360 switch. So I'm immigrant too, so my relationship with money is very based on what I learned back home as a kid and what I learned from, I would say, from the community. And then going through my own education, getting exposed and all, I've really had to change my perspective on money. Exactly how? Well, we'll get into it during the episode. But I know I've done a double switch of like, oh, this is what the community thinks. This is what I grew up understanding. And then when I got a little bit more financially exposed, I'm like, oh no, this doesn't work. Like, and then I've had to like find that middle ground. But yeah, what about you? What's the relationship with money been? Now I'm curious. Go, shoot.
My relationship with money has been very rocky. You know, these toxic, unstable relationships. And that's my experience. Simply because I never really thought further when it came to money. It was more like, oh, if I have a source of income, I'll just buy whatever I want, right? I'll just, spend, but never really thinking of savings and everything related to retirement and RAAR and all these different codes you have concerning just finances and credit cards and all that. So to me, it was just, something that you use to purchase stuff. And then growing up, I kind of understood that, no, that's not how it works. You have to save, you have to invest, you have to think further. And once I understood that, it was kind of like hitting a rock. Just because I kind of had to like switch the way I viewed money. That, yes, it's there to allow you to fulfill some of your desires, right? Materialistic desires, but it's also there to secure a future for you and to help you invest in other things. And so, so my relationship with money now, I'm still learning, just like you, a learning process, but we're doing good. We're better than before. We've learned and we're trying to, move forward into the right path. So
that's the goal, improvement.
Exactly, improvement. Yeah.
So jumping into it. So the first touch point is the two different cultural perspectives of that I would say most immigrants have. Let's dive a little bit into that more. So by two different cultural perspectives, we mean, depending on how you grew up, if you grew up in Africa or if you live in, I would say, an immigrant home, there's some sort of an education that you get, even if it's direct or indirect, but there's some sort of an education that you get on money. And then based on where you find yourself or in the ecosystem, so in this case in Canada, there is also a system in place. So like how do we understand those? How do we navigate those two systems? I'm curious to know what you think, like, or to know your experiences. Like, how have you, like, are you actually aware that there's a difference in the two systems, and how do you navigate those?
Okay, well, on my end, I am aware now that there is a difference with both systems, simply because I've had to have multiple conversations with my cousins, family, who came from the Congo, not a long time ago. And so it kind of like helped me understand how we view money differently, and also being over there for a while also allowed me to see how the system is not made the same, whether we're talking about like monthly or bi-weekly pays, or just savings or thinking ahead. It's not the same. But I would say it's more in the education I got on money that it played a huge impact on actually we were speaking of also my relationship with money and my perspective of these two cultural ways to see money. I grew up not necessarily having an education on finances. I would say that that's how maybe it delayed maybe my own understanding of finances and just taking it seriously. I would say that's how maybe it impacted for me personally.
Makes sense. What are some of the differences between, I would say, the West in this particular case, the Canadian financial system or financial ecosystem, and say Africa? We can pick two countries in this case. Let's say Cameroon and Congo. Like, what are some of the differences that, okay, if someone comes into the country today, you can be like, okay, au Cameroun c'est comme ça, or in Cameroon is like that, or Congo c'est comme ça, in Congo is like that, but here it's like this. Like, what are some of those differences?
I know that example for weddings, right, or like big events that happens within the Congolese community. There's this thing where people, your family members and the people close to you are going to pitch in financially for that event to take place. And here, it's not necessarily something that is done, or something that's, it's not necessarily something that's done often. And so coming here, for example, if I had to throw a wedding tomorrow, I wouldn't necessarily, if I came from the Congo, like maybe 2 years from now, I probably would expect the people around me to pitch in, probably would expect the people around me to be invested financially in order for that wedding to happen. But here it's not necessarily the same. People are used to getting debts, like to go to the banks and taking a loan to make that event happen, if it goes beyond their budget. I think that's like one aspect that's like different. I know that also in Morocco, I once heard a lady that was explaining it from Morocco. She was basically saying that there's this thing that they do in their community. It's a form of savings, right? They all pitch in an amount in their community. We could be 20, 10, it doesn't matter. And each month, one person of that circle receives an amount. And that kind of keeps like a cash flow within their little community circle they have created. Here, it's not really something that you'll see often. That system that allows you to get money from your peers. It's more so if you need money, you go to the bank. You go to an institution. So I guess like a major difference between those two cultures would be how community, like in Africa, would really be like how community plays a part into your finances, and here it's more so an institution that has an impact on your finances and can help you develop your projects, etc. Yeah.
Great. So essentially, you're saying like in some parts of Africa or in different countries, there's always like this rotatory savings system where different countries call it differently. I think Congolese call it Likelemba. I'm probably not pronouncing it properly, but something like that. Nigerians call it Ajo. Some parts of Central Africa, Cameroon, and the Ivory Coast, they call it Tontine, or some parts call it njangi. But essentially, they put money together and they give it to one person, and then it goes around until everybody receives. Yeah. And one of the biggest advantages of that is that communal way of helping each other.
Hello, community. Since Dohzy's principal objective is to serve the diaspora, we have used modern-day technology to deliver a service some of you might have used or heard of back home. Depending on what region you're from, you might have known this as Tontine, njangi, or Likelemba. At Dohzy, we call it dojang. So how does it typically work? So essentially, members contribute a fixed sum of money every single month and give it to one person. And the receiver of the funds changes every month until everybody has received and contributed. So for example, 10 people will come together to contribute a sum of $100 every month for 10 months, and each month, every contributor receives $1,000 until all 10 members have received their funds. At Dohzy, the process is very similar to how it's done in the community. The principal difference at Dohzy is that everything is done online, and we act as administrators. You must firstly request to participate. At this point, you tell us how much you want to contribute. We are also going to ask you for financial information such as pay stubs and bank statements. Secondly, pay a participation fee. Third step, contribute. You'll have to make your contribution before the 25th of each month. And lastly, receive the funds. When it is your turn to receive the contributions, you can connect to your Dohzy account and withdraw the funds from your wallet manually, or they will automatically be sent to you. There are 3 conditions to participate. You should firstly be based in Canada. You should secondly be employed. And if you are an active Dohzy user, for more information or consultation, please contact us directly by email at info@dohzy.com or visit us directly on our website at dohzy.com.
On my end, I think one of the fundamental differences, there's a lot of them, between, I would say, the Western system and the, I would say, maybe Africa, that I think when most people come in, it takes a while to grasp, but I suggest they really grasp that really rapidly. Is that in the West, things are very, I would say, are very data-driven. In the sense that, like here we have like a credit system and all. So if you've never used a credit card, if you've never used any form of credit, there's no data on you. So you can go and explain your best story, like nobody's listening to you. Everybody's looking at the computer. So there's no traces of anything.
Yeah.
Nobody listens to you.
Yeah.
So sometimes maybe, like you mentioned, the whole communal way of living in Africa, people get to talk, people listen to them, people try to see what they can do here. Everybody's just looking at the computer. So like, what data do we have on you? If you go to the bank and you say you want a loan, they'll be like, have you taken a loan before? Do you know what loans are? Do you understand loans? If they say no, they decrease the amount.
Yeah.
If you've taken loans before and you're used to loans, then be like, oh, okay, so you have experience, so you have maybe have a good credit, but at least you know what a loan is. Oh, let's give you more money. So it's those data-driven ways of looking at things in the West that people, I think for most immigrants or for most people just coming to the country, they need to get that that adaptation or that perspective of doing things. But to me, I would say personally, and from my observation in the community, because you talked about relationship with money, and I think where I had to do the 360 is the way we teach, or the way I experience, let me not generalize, but the way I experience finance, I would say in Africa and in the African community, it's very focused on savings, which is good. It's very focused on saving money, put money aside, go and do your project. It's very defensive. Like, don't borrow, don't take money from anyone. If you take someone's money, make sure you give them back. So it's very defensive in its approach. So we grow learning to not get into debt, which is fine. I'm not saying get into debt. But what I've noticed in the West is when you get that education of running away from debt, what you miss is debt management.
Yep.
Which here, I think one of the fundamental skills that you have to have in finance is debt management, because like it or not, you're going to get into debt. And I could just go a little bit in depth here. When I say get into debt, I'm not talking about credit cards and all of those things. So a classic difference would be, okay, if you're in Africa and you want to build a house, or you want a house, most of the time, like you rightly said, they have things like the njangi, Tontine, Likelemba, ajo, like they have a communal way of putting money together, and little by little you build your house, right? So you can, over a 5-year, 10-year period, get your house. The house might not be complete, you get into it, little by little you complete the house. So after like 15, 5 years, whatever time frame, your house is done, you're happy, you're in there. Here is like the complete opposite.
Yeah.
What happens? To get a house, you put down a down payment, and then you go get a loan, which is called a mortgage, to get a house. So now you have a mortgage, or you have a loan of 500,000, 800,000, whatever that price is, that you have to manage over 15 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So now the skills of debt management become really important, because then how do I earn X amount of money and keep paying this mortgage every month? While keeping up with all of the other things, credit cards and all of those things. So that's where sometimes we struggle, because what we learned was to be on the defense. Keep money, keep money, keep money, use your own money. But now we find ourselves in a system where you have someone else's money. How do you manage that person? How do you manage someone else's money with everything going on? And sometimes we struggle, and hopefully at some point we get it. But I would say those were some of the differences. That's why I mentioned before that I personally got that education of saving, and then it's when I got more into finance that I realized, oh, like, no, it's good to save, but you need to understand debt management, capacity, and all of that. And I've had to like reformat my approach to money, to know when to play on the defense, savings and all, but to know when to play on the attack. Like, okay, how do I use loans? Like, how do I get money and manage it properly? Yeah.
But if we're just, I love what you said, but when you were speaking about debt, you're speaking really in general, right? But if you want to dive specifically in depth, but speak about credit cards, because I know that it's also something, because we spoke about how in Africa we have this culture of saving, and that's attached to fear. But I know for my part that credit card is something that was never allowed. For us, it doesn't matter how old we were. It was always kind of like a fear. I believe because the people around us had used it not in the right way, had used it in the wrong way, and so it didn't really leave, kind of left a stain on like the image of credit cards. But what we don't realize, or what our parents didn't realize before, is that yes, credit cards they give you money that does not belong to you, but then again, you're building a credit to be able to purchase other things, to build a life for yourself afterwards, right? And that, I think, that lack of knowledge attached to that fear is also something that refrains us in our financial knowledge and financial freedom overall. Is that something that you've ever experienced when you came here with this whole? Did you even have a fear of using credit cards?
Yes, actually, personally, yes. It took me, on average basis, I'll say compared to my other friends, a longer time to get credit cards, or to get a credit card, because whenever I went home and I just mentioned credit cards, or whenever I went in the community and I just mentioned credit cards, everyone was like, oh my God, no. It's like, and I wouldn't say credit cards are bad. Neither will I say credit cards are good. I actually was having this conversation with a friend the other day. I don't want to bring violence in here, but I would say credit cards is like a gun. Like, okay, like a gun can be used to protect yourself, or it can be used for something good, and it can be used for something bad. So my point is, my point is, I don't know, maybe we should not be talking about guns here, but
it's like a weapon. It's like a weapon. It's like a weapon. Yeah.
Okay, maybe we should take the gun part out. But my point is, like, credit is one of those things that you can use it well, and if you use it well, it's going to serve you well, and you can use it badly, and if you use it badly, it's going to serve you badly with bad credit, and it's going to block you and all of. So it's not a thing of, so it's a thing of educating us on how to use it, not necessarily saying that not necessarily stereotyping it to be bad.
Yeah, but in order for you to even know that, is it bad, is it good, you need to go through it, right? Because
exactly.
Everybody gets to learn to manage it as they're in it. And so it's not something that we should run away from, but rather just be careful as we're using. I think just have a little wisdom. Don't just like take, because the way I see it is like, it's money that does not belong to you. So at the end of the day, you're going to have to pay it back, but it's learning.
So the way I'll approach a conversation, so like, if I had to go back, right? So maybe when I was a teenager and I come and like, oh, I want a credit card. And everyone's like, oh my God, it's going to kill your credit. Oh my God, credit cards are bad and all. I think the way I approach it now, if someone younger comes to me and like, oh, I want to use a credit card, I'll be like, okay, maybe, let's say it's my kid or it's my child. I'll probably, my first question will be like, okay. And my first question will be, what's the limit on the card? So it's more of having those guidelines around the card than necessarily just saying no. So for example, if someone is still early career or you're a student and you're just working part-time, a credit card of $300 to build your credit is not it's not bad. So I think it's more of in the community to guide us, because sometimes when the bank is increasing your limit, they're expecting you to be responsible.
Yeah.
So you as a parent, or you as a guardian, or members of the community, it's more of like having that guidance around the card. Like, okay, don't go and take a credit card with the limit of 10,000 on it just because the bank said you can have a credit card of 10,000. You can be like, or the people around you can be like, oh, okay, man, based on where you find yourself, maybe 500 or maybe 2,000 or 1,000 is a better limit, so that you can learn through the process.
Yeah.
But to just stay away from credit, it's like staying away from computers, why we have computers everywhere and you're on Earth. So like it's like
it's not a good mix. It's not a good mix.
Now there's another challenge that we face, in that how do I balance my finances here where I am, so Canada or North America or Europe or wherever I find myself out of my country, and my finances back home, because you also do have finances back home, right? If you're a member of the diaspora, you might have parents, you might have kids, you might have family members back home that sometimes you might have to send them money or send them support, and so how do you balance those two wallets?
Wallets, yeah.
So what are some of the struggles that you have seen, I'll say, in the community? Maybe you might not have experienced it, but you might have heard of, or you might have maybe experienced, or like what do people struggle with?
This doesn't really start once you move. It's interesting because it starts even back home in Africa. It's very common to see how, again, the community, whether it's like cousins or friends, they contribute maybe for a little one's education. Maybe if I might not have the finances to send my child to school, but I'll have maybe my older brother who does have a great job, who does earn his life very well, who is going to contribute and send money for my child's education. And let's say that he moves abroad. Well, he moves abroad, gets a new life, a new job, but his responsibilities doesn't stop because I'm still in the same position where I don't have a job or I'm not in a better financial situation to be able to take care of my child by myself. And so that's a reality that's seen often in Africa. The way I've seen it was more in Africa than outside of Africa. How like, it was also shocking to me a little because I never knew that that was a reality. I thought that everybody kind of cared for their own children or their own household, but it's not how it is. If you are the breadwinner, let's say it like that, in your family, you will be caring for a lot of people, and that can be really heavy. I just imagine, because you come here, you have your monthly bills, you have to take care of maybe your own family living here with you, but you also have your nephew that needs his tuition paid for the next semester, and you can't just say that you're not going to do it anymore, because who's going to do it?
Yep. I don't want to give financial advice, but one of the biggest suggestions that I would suggest on this particular topic is more of, if you find yourself in a situation where you have to manage your finances, but also help back home, I think it's just adapting to that reality. Like, you should be very aware that, okay, as much as I have this job that pays me this amount, and I have all of these peers that are living this type of lifestyle because I have the same job, in my case, I have another family or I have more mouths to feed somewhere else. So it's just adapting to it. And sometimes adapting to it might not necessarily mean you go so low on the scale. It could just be, okay, if I have to live on a $400,000, if I have to buy a $400,000 house that I'm going to pay, I'm just giving random numbers here, that I have to pay a mortgage of $1,500 a month, then I'm not going to have enough free cash flow to help my family. So maybe I step down a little bit and I get into a house of $300,000 to have an extra $300 every month to be able to send it back home. So it's just being aware that, okay, I have more mouths to feed than the average person, so let me adjust accordingly.
Accordingly is a big part. Accordingly, like to really take into account when you're doing your finances that you have other expenses than just like your little life.
Exactly. There's another interesting demography because immigration brings a lot of different things, which is I would say the elderly, but I wouldn't really say the elderly. I would say the parents. So people that are slightly older, right? So because they get to face, I would say, they have like, I would say, a triple challenge, right? They have to take care of their kids. Some of those kids might be back home, some of those kids might be here. They also have to take care of responsibilities back home, like I would say, like the young adults or the adults. So like they also have to handle those responsibilities. But there's a third catch to it, or there's a third challenge to it, where they also have to like, oh, I'm getting older. Like, what do I do for retirement? How much do I have for retirement? Like, how do I navigate the system? Because based on when you come to, I'll say Canada in this case, it plays a big role in how much you have for retirement, right? So if you come in at 40, by the time you go through all of the maneuvers to settle down in the new country, maybe you're really into your career at what, 45, maybe even 50, give or take, compared to someone that started working at 16. They probably, when they get to 40, they probably have enough money for retirement. When you start at 40, at 45 or 50, now you don't have enough money for retirement, and which is not your fault per se. It's just the reality of it. Like, you just not accumulated that much for retirement. So what do you do? How do you navigate this challenge? Now I'm curious, is this something that you think the community is aware of? Are they doing something about it, or maybe people don't know yet? Like, what have you observed around?
Based on what the conversations, right, that I've heard, it's not necessarily something that I've heard people speak of a lot. I know for my entourage, a lot of them are planning, the older ones, are planning to go back home. That's mostly what I've seen. It's like they come here, they have businesses, or they come here to study and whatnot, and they go back home to retire for multiple reasons, not necessarily because of finances and how the system is built, but more the lifestyle, how they stay more active back home than here, where you're mostly in retirement homes, not doing much, and you barely have people coming to see you, etc. So it's really like that social aspect that makes them go back. I haven't necessarily gotten to encounter older people who decided to stay here for their retirement. And I think now that we even like discussed this, maybe that's one of the reasons why. It's the fact that it's not realistic to come here at an older age and to expect to finish your life here and to be well, to live off of what money, you know?
And I won't blame them. I think when you come in, there's just so much that you have to process, the kids and all. And by the time you really get to like the reality of things, it's like, ooh, it's like you're actually close to that age. But anyways, my point is, what I've realized is they don't really think about the finances in that way. Like, oh, I'm really not actually going to have the money. So they just say, oh, I'll go back to Africa someday, and then they go back to work, right? But do they really plan to go back to Africa? Do they really have the structure? Do they have the money somewhere? I think it's something that I've not seen a lot of that. Of course, there are exceptions, but I've not seen a lot of that. I've not seen a lot of meticulous planning or just awareness of oh, my situation is different. What I've seen a lot is, I would say, for lack of a better word, last minute panicking. It's like, oh wait, now I'm 60. Wait, and then they start punching different buttons. Again, I don't blame them. I think most African parents, I'm very proud of them. They're very hardworking. They've done a lot to bring us here. They still do a lot to keep us here. It's just a reality that they have to face, and we all have to face. In terms of suggestions, let me get your perspective first, but I do have a couple of suggestions.
On this topic specifically? Yes. Well, for suggestions, I guess would really be to tap in more into that meticulous planning that you mentioned, because it's a reality. It's like you're working now, you're earning money, you're able to provide for your family, but at a certain point, you won't have that as much energy to put into the work you do, or to work long hours. And so you might still be working part-time here and there, but is that really what you want to be doing when your body is tired and doesn't necessarily want to spend all its time at a 9 to 5. So it's really to think that it's a reality that's coming and to find ways to make your retirement a process or a moment that is going to be enjoyable for you, whether it's staying here or going to Puerto Rico or going
Cuba.
back to Cuba, going
Cancun.
Yeah. The dream. Or going back home. Like, what does that look like for you, and how do you plan on getting there? That's important as well, because I know that they work a lot. The African parents who come here and they work very hard to ensure that their children have a future, can study and be well. But there's also you after that, because once your children leave the house, you're left.
You got to take care of yourself.
With yourself, and it's a reality you have to deal with. So the meticulous planning.
That's very correct. Just meticulous planning. One of my suggestions is almost very similar to the previous one. Just being realistic and being aware of your situation. Again, it's always this, like I mentioned before. It's like, okay, yeah, just being aware that, okay, I came into this country at 40. My life at retirement is going to be different.
Yes.
I started working at 41. So I don't have a retirement fund. So just being aware of that, awareness helps a lot, because just being aware of that, it gives you a form of direction, right? Because then you can start really looking into things that you can do. I don't. Again, this is the second time I'm saying this. I don't want to give financial advice, but I'll give what I'll call financial frameworks. So so some sort of a way of thinking of things. So the first one is the obvious one of being aware that, okay, my finances are different. I think the second one too is getting some clarity for yourself. A lot of this is psychology. When I say clarity, it's like, because we have a lot of also the elderly or parents that say they want to go back to Africa, but they're not making the moves to go back to Africa. Yeah. So do you really want to go back or you don't want to go back? Now, I'm not saying you should go. I'm not saying you should stay. What I'm saying is you have to be clear with yourself, like,
this is what I want.
This is what I want. So because by the time you say you want to go back to Africa, it changes the direction of your planning. Yeah. And so you should plan accordingly to go back to Africa. If you say, oh no, I've disconnected from Africa all over the years and I would like to stay here, that also changes the direction of things. Or some parents like to do both. If you like to do both, what is your base? Like, I want to do 6 months, I don't know, Canada, 3 months, Togo or whatever country, like just getting some sort of a vision or strategy or direction of like, okay, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be? I think will be a good starting point. But at the end of the day, Africa or Canada or United States or Cancun or Cuba is going to require one thing. Money. So how do you navigate that? Again, back to my point of I'll say financial frameworks, not financial advice. I think you should get to a point that, okay, how much capital do I have? Should be one of the questions that you should ask yourself. But I think at a certain point in life, and especially when you're older, most of your financial decisions should be cash flow oriented. And I'll just get into a little bit of details here without getting too technical, is that you should try to put money or look into things that will generate you cash in the short term. Because just being very blunt and realistic, you're getting older, you need cash for just lots of things. Hospital, living your best life, if that's what you want, but you need the cash. So if you're evaluating things like investment opportunities or business or whatever it is, always have that framework of like, okay, if I put in 10,000 a year, I would like this 10,000 first of all to generate me say $1,000 a month in a certain period of time. So you might have to go maybe on the defense and not take too much risk, but go for more cash flow. Like, okay, I would like to put my 10,000 here to give me 10,000, to give me 11,000 at the end of the year. But what I really need is a check of $500 a month. Yeah. So that you can live off of that. That would be I think that would be one of my suggestions. So literally 3 things: being realistic of of your situation.
Yeah.
Looking into things that can generate you cash while you live, and
Meticulous planning.
exactly, meticulous planning.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, and I think all these three take being realistic, like you said, number one, but it takes being realistic
Yep.
to achieve all three.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I think it's important that we touch point on these challenges and hoping that you watching as well can resonate with them, but also it encourages you to be more realistic with your planning, or maybe to seek for good resources that would help you manage your finances better, because like we mentioned, cultural perspectives on finances are different and require adjustment and adaptability, and that could be given to you with resources that are offered to you, a lot of them here in Canada.
Thanks a lot, everyone, and until next time.
Until next time.